Hello and welcome back to the Logistics Leadership Podcast. I am Karl Siebrecht, CEO of Flex, and it is great to be with you again. This is season 2, episode 1, and I am super excited to welcome Dr. Zac Rogers, who is an assistant professor of supply chain management at Colorado State University. His primary research goal is to demonstrate and explore the relationship between supply chain sustainability and financial performance. He is also the lead author of the Monthly Logistics Managers Index, or LMI. Zac, would love to have you introduce yourself, even though I took some of your thunder there, and tell us about yourself and a little bit about what you do.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Karl. It's great to be here in the season premiere. That's
It
exciting.
is.
I feel honored by it. I will say actually that part of my introduction, I'm now an associate professor at Colorado State University. Now I know, Karl, you've known me since I was a lowly PhD student who didn't know anything about anything. So it's I understand. It's life comes at you quick. But anyway, it's great to be here. As Karl said, my name is Zac Rogers. I'm a professor of supply chain management at Colorado State University. And the idea behind the LMI is that America really, and the world, is so interconnected through logistics. It's 9% of GDP. I mean, I tell my students this sometimes and they don't believe me, but I say stuff like, look, the logistics industry in the US is bigger than the GDP of Mexico.
Right.
And Mexico's, a top 15, 20 GDP in the world. So it's not the stuff on the trucks or in the warehouses. It's just the trucks and the warehouses. It's this giant piece of our economy. And so the idea with the LMI was essentially to be a modern day PMI. So I'm sure all the listeners today are familiar with the PMI, the Purchasing Managers Index, started by Hoagland and Fearon, Michigan State and Arizona State professors, actually, because everyone in supply chain went to like 5 schools. And so the idea they had was a great idea for the early 60s when they developed the index, which was, well, if something's going to be sold, before that, it has to be in inventory and it has to be manufactured. So let's look at changes in manufacturing and inventories and things like that. And that'll tell us how to predict future economic activity. And it worked great, by the way. Those guys had the 2 biggest houses in East Lansing, Michigan, I think, because they were so good at predicting the economy. So in 2016, we went down to actually the PMI offices at ISM, which is in Tempe. And we kind of asked them, okay, so how does this work? I mean, we knew the basics, but how do you guys do it? And they were very nice to us. ISM and Arizona State are very, very closely linked, and they helped us out with the methodology. And really, we just copied their methodology. But the difference is, instead of looking at things like production, we look at logistics. So the idea was, in 1961, it makes a lot of sense to predict the U.S. economy by manufacturing, but in 2016, rather, probably makes sense to look at things like transportation,
Right.
Because we're a service economy. So the idea was, well, if it's going to be sold in a store in August, it's going to be on a truck in July or in a warehouse in July. And so essentially what we do is we ask, and we have a really nice respondent base who's always great about taking time to work with us. And they're all folks who are director level and above in their company. So people who really have a 20,000 foot view of the supply chain. And we ask them about 8 different indices. And we say, is it going up? Is it staying the same? Or is it going down? And so the things we ask them about are inventory levels and costs.
Okay.
And then for both transportation and utilization, we ask them about capacity, utilization, and price. And so by knowing those 8 metrics, we have a really good idea of if the logistics industry is expanding this month or contracting.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about numbers here. Any number over 50 is expansion. Any number under 50 is contraction.
Okay, got it. Makes so much sense. You move from a manufacturing economy more to a services economy where manufacturing, or a great deal of it, happens offshore. So now let's track logistics instead. So you ask managers about what they are seeing or what they are doing in terms of their spend levels. Give us a sense of who are these managers? They work in Fortune 500 companies. They work in
Sure.
services and in the logistics services industry. Who
Mhm.
are these folks?
So they're really from across the spectrum. We have a lot of manufacturers, a lot of retailers,
Okay.
and then LSPs. So 3PLs, freight forwarders, fleets, warehousing folks,
Okay.
really from all over the place. And within retail, we have it broken out into apparel, electronics, home and garden. It's a pretty wide slice in terms of industry. And we also ask, okay, how big is the company? We have companies under $10 million respond to this thing, and we have companies in the high billions
Okay.
responding as well. There's a couple Fortune 500 folks on there
Good mix.
that we get every
So
month. So
it's a
it's
good
it's a
mix.
very broad spectrum. Most of them are based in North America,
Okay.
but obviously operate internationally.
Great. So you've been tracking this or doing this survey since 2016 on a monthly basis?
Yes, September of 2016 we started. In the first maybe two, not quite 2 years, maybe year and a half, we were every 2 months, just because it took a while to build up the critical mass
Okay.
of respondents we needed. We would there'd be months where we weren't even getting the triple digits in the first days, and so it's really we didn't feel comfortable going out with 70 people and saying, "Hey, here's what's happening." So
Right.
we did it every 2 months in the beginning. Now we do it every month. And yeah, so I think we've done it every month, maybe for the last 6 years about.
Got it. Got it. So I want to start to get into what you're seeing in the data. Just to provide a little context. I know our audience probably doesn't need to be reminded of this, but from the tailwinds that COVID generated for the logistics industry, in large part, we have run as an industry, we've run into some headwinds starting probably in 22, 23. So give us a sense, actually, if you wouldn't mind, give us a sense of what you're seeing now in the most recent data here in the midway through 2024, but also give us a sense of the context and how that relates to what you've seen over the past, you know, 2 years or so. Where are we in the trend?
Okay. So you're absolutely right. COVID was sort of the driving factor in all this. And here's the analogy I've been using. It's sort of like COVID was you're driving your car and you see something in the road and you swerve to the right. Well, generally, what happens after you swerve to the right is then you swerve back to the left and
Right.
you overcorrect. And so we had overcorrection, correction, overcorrection, and you might sort of spin back and forth, right and left on your car, and then finally, eventually, those oscillations will get smaller and you start to go straight again.
I like that.
We're starting to go straight again,
Okay.
is what's happening. So if you look at things like inventories, we've been running pretty lean, especially downstream all summer. But upstream, so if we're talking about wholesalers and distributors, we've seen inventories pick up.
Okay.
The Port of LA and Long Beach all through July, if you look at their TEUs, up 40% year over year
Wow.
from last year, which to me says seasonality. It's the first time really since COVID that it seems like we're having a normal, healthy inventory buildup going into back to school, Q4 holiday spending.
Okay.
So it seems fairly normal. The other thing we're seeing is we're finally starting to come out of the freight recession that we had been in for the last 2 years. So the freight recession really started in either April or May. I would say May of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
That was when inflation was crazy and there was just things weren't moving. And then the last 3 months of our report, so May, June, and July
Mm-hmm.
of 2024, transportation prices have grown faster than transportation capacity.
Okay.
And those are the two metrics we look at to decide, are we in a freight recession or not? And now that we've got a full quarter of it,
Mm-hmm.
I think we can say, unless something crazy happens,
Yep.
that the freight recession is probably over. And so what that means is we're now soaking up enough of that excess capacity that we built up over COVID. So going back to COVID, like you asked there, we had such a classic bullwhip effect. So the week 6 of sophomore year supply chain at every university in the country is we play the beer game
Yep.
and we learn about the bullwhip effect.
Yep.
And we were saying, now the problem is when you're in it, when you see all of this, put yourself in the shoes of, say, Target or any large retailer in mid 2021, you're thinking, gosh, people are spending so much money. They just got $1 trillion put in their pockets twice.
Right.
Twice in 18 months, we got $1 trillion put in our pockets. We can't spend money on services. There's no Taylor Swift concert tour this week, this year. We can't go to baseball games. So we're spending money on goods. And, e-commerce grew just, for example, in the 3 months between January and April of 2020, e-commerce grew as much as a percentage of retail as it had in the previous 8 years.
Yeah.
So anybody who's like, why did supply chains break? Well, imagine if your boss came to you and said, hey, this quarter we got to get 8 years of work done. That's what happened in e-commerce. And so we have this huge demand and everyone's rushing to catch up. Remember that people were like chartering their own ships to go across the ocean, get around the lines, all this kind of crazy stuff. And we really built up inventories with the thought that, okay, December of 21 is going to be the biggest Christmas holiday season ever, December 21.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first time we thought something was wrong. So in our report in December 21, we saw that inventory levels went up from November to December. That should not happen. Inventory is not supposed to go up in December, but it did. And so we thought, well, that's odd. Especially because we know we still have supply chain delays. So not all the inventory that was supposed to be here is even here yet. And it was a couple things. One was, what was it called? Omicron. I don't know if you remember that. It was like the 4th version of COVID.
Right,
you guys remember? Yeah. It was like the Jaws 4 of COVID, of COVID. And it just shut down the East Coast. Yep. Spending just stopped in the biggest part of the country. And so we didn't get rid of inventories. And then the thing that happened after that was ships kept showing up. So we had placed all these big orders. And like what always happens when we play the beer game with students and in real life is demand is often in front of supply. And so supply got there and demand was already starting to dissipate. The holiday season was over. And then at the end of that, at the end of February, February 22, Russia invades Ukraine. Yeah. And Ukraine gets invaded. Now suddenly, a 12th to an 8th, depending on the numbers, of all diesel fuel is just gone. Two of the 5 biggest producers of wheat, that's not coming out anymore.
Yep.
Oil and wheat are inputs into a whole lot of things, and suddenly that's gone. At the same time, all of that stuff that was supposed to show up for Christmas shows up for President's Day, basically.
Not as much of a gift-giving occasion.
Yeah, no, hey, Karl, what'd you get your wife for President's Day this year? And so it's a bust of Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah.
And so we have all this inventory now stuck right as inflation picks up like crazy. And so we built up all these goods and now we're not spending on it. And so and that is also when the freight recession hits.
Yep.
Because now we built up these huge, massive truck fleets for this crazy demand. And we knew the party was going to stop eventually. We just weren't expecting it to stop right then. But suddenly, bottom falls out, and we just have the logistics industry, everyone's sitting there looking at each other basically through the rest of 2022.
Yeah.
In warehousing, it was just jam-packed, right? Like, you have companies saying, oh, we're taking billions of dollars of write-downs just to get rid of inventories because we can't even walk through our distribution centers anymore. Right. Amazon had 2 Prime days that year. We were doing anything we could just to run down all of these goods. And that really persisted even through last year. So 2021 was we can't get stuff here fast enough. 2022 was we don't have anywhere to put this stuff.
Right.
And then 2023 was very cautious. A lot of people thought there'd be a bounce back in 23 and we were we were never incredibly optimistic about the bounce back in 23, partly because it goes back to like Isaac Newton of for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So we had 2 years of real boom and we thought, well, are we only going to have 9 months of a kind of pullback and then bounce back? It seemed unlikely because remember, we built up capacity for 2 years of a boom.
That's right.
And it seemed unlikely that things are going to come back, especially because interest rates never came down in 2023. People thought, oh, maybe summer of 23,
Yep.
and it ended up missing the boat by about a year.
Right.
And which in hindsight seems like maybe it was the right move.
Right.
But it kept costs really high, and it stopped, especially upstream, big investments from happening. So we're not seeing the big investments in, oh, let's build some new warehouses
Yep.
somewhere. I mean, you had investment in manufacturing because of the CHIPS Act and things like that, but you didn't have a big investment, especially compared to 21 and 20, in sort of warehousing networks and things like that. So
Got it.
stuff slowed down, and we ran inventories pretty lean for most of 2023 as well. We saw a small buildup in at the end of 23, but nothing like it was in 21, and it was also late in 23.
Right.
So the buildup happened late because people were thinking, well, I don't want to get burned again.
That's
And now coming in 24, inventories have really been run down, especially retailers. Retailers like JIT is back
right.
basically, and now it seems like we're getting back to regular seasonality.
Fascinating. So a little over 2 years in, then the freight recession. We're kind of ready to call it over. Seeing 3 months of data.
I think so. I think now you never know,
Sure.
right? I mean, there's something crazy could happen tomorrow. We didn't see COVID coming. We didn't see Ukraine coming. I mean, who knows what could
Right.
happen? And we could certainly have trade policy is one of the things on the ballot in November. And if we have a big change in tariff policy, that could also change the flow of goods,
Yep.
certainly.
Yep.
But status quo, like ceteris paribus, all things being equal, it does seem like the freight recession of 22 and 23 is coming to a close.
Yeah. And in the data, are you still seeing relative areas of softness across the logistics landscape? Or
Yes,
okay, what
yes.
are those?
So the big split we see right now is upstream versus downstream, and we classify upstream and downstream as downstream is basically retailers,
Okay. Yep.
anyone customer facing. Upstream's kind of everyone else. So distributors, manufacturers, wholesalers, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
3PLs. Upstream is seeing inventories grow. So in June, the numbers we had for the upstream downstream split were a 51 and a half upstream and a 37 downstream. Basically, what that represents to me is downstream firms are running down the sort of spring and summer inventories, getting ready for new stuff to come in. My wife and I were at Costco a couple days ago, and she was appalled because Halloween decorations are already up. And it's like in July, and so companies are running down that summer stuff and bringing in pumpkins and stuff.
Right. And just for quick context, the when a number is greater than 50, that means it's expanding, and below 50 means it's contracting, and sort of the further away you are from 50 in either direction, the more.
Faster that's
There
going.
you go.
So if you are something like, say, warehousing prices for our upstream firms, that's at 67. That's a pretty fast rate of
Mhm.
contraction. Downstream, it was 56. So still, or sorry, fast rate of expansion, I
Expansion,
should
yeah.
say. Fifth for upstream or downstream was 56 and a half. That's still expansion, but not as fast. And so one of the things when you're reading the index is just because something, say, goes from, and I'll use an example from, say, July. Warehousing prices from June to July of 2024 went from 64 and a half in June to 60.6 in July.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so it went down 4 points. That doesn't mean that warehouses are cheaper.
Yep.
It just means that the slope is flatter than it was the month
There
before.
you go.
So the growth has sort of slowed down.
Got it. Yeah, very
That
helpful.
makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah. So the thing that we're seeing right now is that overall inventory levels are still slightly contracting.
Mhm.
Okay. So overall in June they were 47.4, in July 49.1. That to me though doesn't necessarily mean softness.
Okay.
To me that says JIT. And we would definitely expect those numbers to go back above 50. I mean, at 49.1 we were close in July. I would definitely expect those to go back above 50 in August and September, as especially downstream, we start to bulk up again
Yeah.
for spending seasons,
Yeah.
and it looks like, honestly, we could have sort of a Goldilocks economic situation in Q4, especially if interest rates really come
Yeah.
down in September and consumer spending has sort of lasted. I mean, yeah, we're doing more stuff buy now, pay later, more credit card, but it's lasted. And we now the key to interest rates going down is upstream will be able to make some investments,
Greater investments. Yep.
and that should sort of bring up demand in different places, I think, and especially it'll sort of supercharge freight activity upstream in a way that we really haven't seen for probably 2.5 years.
Right. Right. Yeah. You almost don't want to say it out loud, but this whole soft landing thing might actually kind of sort of be happening. It,
I
it
know. Yeah,
feels
it's
like.
like it's like a no talking in the clubhouse kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like a
Exactly.
perfect game in the seventh inning, and like, don't talk about
Yeah.
it.
Don't talk about it. Hey, and I have to ask, so does Fed Chair Powell have you on speed dial now that this LMI is so insightful?
Not him. We have talked to some folks from the San Francisco Fed who have been very nice to us. One thing I would recommend everybody checks out. Adam Shapiro at the San Francisco Fed does a breakout of the sources of inflation, both supply and demand inflation,
Okay.
and it's fascinating. A lot of our big inflation times came from the supply side, not the demand side, and so I think we've done all we can with interest rates at this point. And really, when you saw inflation start to go down, it was when supply chains kind of unkinked
Hmm.
in mid 2023, and we got through a lot of that excess inventory that was driving the costs up, kind of all over the place.
Got it. Well, this has been fantastic exploration of, or maybe just explanation of the LMI. And I would just encourage all our listeners to look up Logistics Managers Index and sign up. There's an email they can sign up for. You'll get it dropped into your inbox. Is this true?
Yep, we will send it to anybody. It comes out the first Tuesday of every month, and we send it to you for free. The last year of reports is up on the site for free. Unlike Hoagland and Furon, we're not making a lot of money on this thing yet.
But you're adding a lot of
But
value, so that
Yeah,
value
but yeah,
capture
we're
comes next.
generating value, and
There
we
you go.
make nice friends like you guys. So
Yeah, value creation starts, and then value capture maybe can follow. Let me switch
we're
gears.
artists over here, Karl.
There you
We're
go. I get it. I get it. Let me switch gears just a little bit. So I would love to get your perspective as a professor in the space with a lot of industry knowledge and a lot of industry contacts. What are your thoughts on the application of AI in supply chain? Are you a bull or a bear? Where are you seeing pockets where you think it's got promise, or you've actually seen value created, or not?
I would say that I am short-term bear, long-term bull.
Okay.
I think it takes a while for us to really figure out how to use any type of technology. I mean, you
Hmm.
remember how excited everybody was about RFID
Oh
and
yes.
like, yeah, and now we're using it a little, but it
Mm.
was years and years
Right.
down the road.
Right.
And so a lot of times there's a long curve to adoption. We come up with this new technology and really excited about it, and we don't really know how to use it yet in a good practical way. So the places where you could see it sort of starting to take root early would be things like forecasting, trying to really hone in on maybe inventories and placing orders, kind of basic routine stuff. Maybe you'll see some routing things, maybe a way to do freight aggregation, like sort of one of the roles of a freight forwarder, for instance. You
Hmm.
could maybe have some aggregation there. The problem is that things like freight forwarding, things like buying, are also so based on human capital, and that's the part that I think is difficult to adjust with AI. I remember when I was a purchasing intern, and I came up with this brand new. So it wasn't brand new, but there was a tab at the casino I worked at for EOQ, and nobody knew what EOQ meant, economic order quantity. Nobody knew what it meant. And they asked me, hey, do you know what this is? And I just learned it. I was in my MBA program. So, oh, wow, let me show you this.
Heck
And I
yeah.
worked on it for a week to figure out how to order this this stuff. Mostly it was food for the restaurants.
Okay.
And so I figured out how to order food. And food obviously is something where, you don't want to have it too early. And so I came up with all these models, and I was doing sophisticated stuff. And I showed my boss, and I said, here you go. And I handed it to him. His name was Mike. And Mike said, oh, okay. Well, did you have fun this week, Zach? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, at least we got something out of this then, I guess. And he's like, these numbers are terrible. And he knew that they were all too high. And he knew that because Mike had been at the casino since 1979, and this is 2009. Literally, his employee ID number was like 00012. Like it was like, the 12th guy to work there. And so he knew like, that's not gonna work. And so you have the human capital. You also have the relationship part, I think, with working with vendors. That can be difficult to replace, but I do believe that you'll see some forecasting stuff, because what AI can do is it can aggregate. That's what we're good at now. We can really aggregate data. Sometimes we don't even ask to do it. Get data from all over the place, and we can then develop a model that I think you still need the human side for the interpretation.
Right.
Really, AI is a big engine.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be figuring out how to put those engines into place
Yep.
to maybe get rid of some of the grunt work.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
If you look at the things that now we don't have to do because the internet exists, the internet didn't take your job; it just changed your job. And I think it'll be very similar with AI, especially for forecasting, maybe some routing things too.
Got it. Super helpful. Okay, short-term bear, longer-term bull.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I think AI is so sophisticated and so it's so powerful that you'd be crazy to not use it. It's really just what we need to do is get to the point where every day, Joe's sitting at their terminal in their computer, trying to uh, route loads or whatever it is we're doing, has just a really easy, nice interface to use. So
Yeah.
we're not to that point yet where it's totally point and click
Right.
in the way it needs to be a big adoption.
Yep. Makes sense. Okay, last question for you. So, from your experience out in the real world, out in the field, as a logistician, uh, what is the craziest or most interesting thing that you have seen out there?
You know, you learn so much about society being a returns manager. The things that come back on returns. I mean, and there'd be stuff we didn't even sell. I remember one time getting a lawnmower back. It's like, do we sell this?
At
No, we
which
don't sell
company?
lawnmowers. This is at Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah, we got a lawnmower back. I don't know. Well, I guess we'll just take it. We're not gonna pay to send it back. One time we got somebody's car keys. And so what happened was we got a box of toys, like maybe for like a 4 or 5-year-old, and then just a pair of keys, like house keys, car keys are in it. And so we called the guy's name on the return authorization, said, "Hey, did you lose your keys? Because we have them." And he was like, "Ugh." He was like, I was sending some of my son's toys back because he's been misbehaving, and I think he put my keys in the box."
Oh,
And then I heard him yell like, "Tyler!" And I thought, wow, Tyler might be an evil genius. I want to stay out of his when he's
truly.
5 years old. Yeah, so it was great. Working there, we got stuff like dog owners sending back a collar because and this was actually interesting. Whoever we were buying these dog collars from put the same barcode on all of them, no matter what color they were. And so the system just said dog collar. And so someone would order a black one, a pink one shows up. And I remember getting a note, like a very angry note from the lady at the return, like, my dog had to wear this to the dog park, and he's a boy. And he was so embarrassed in front of all the other, the dogs are colorblind, but he was embarrassed because he had a pink collar.
Fantastic.
So there was every day opening up, a couple hundred boxes of returns. You had a brand new surprise.
I love it. I love that. That's great. Well, Zach, this has been a real pleasure. I've learned a lot. Really enjoyed speaking with you. Again, for everybody, this is Dr. Zac Rogers. And go check out the LMI And hopefully you will not only learn something from it, but it might give you a sense for what's coming. So Zach, thank you again.
Thank you so much, Karl, for having me. It was a lot of fun to be here, and I look forward to hearing from anybody who's interested in the index. And the whole idea of the index is if we ask as many smart people who are well informed as we can about what's going on, the picture's just going to get better and better. So if that sounds like you, listener, and you want to send me a note, I'd be happy to add anybody to our list, and especially to a respondent list. If you just want to get the thing every month and not participate, that's okay too. We're just happy to get this in front of people.
Wonderful. Thanks again, Zach.